Hi there, and welcome to Continuing Education, a podcast for homeschooling families with actually useful information. Today, we are going to be doing another one of our inclusive devotionals about trusting the process. And if you're new here, an inclusive devotional, instead of pulling from a specific religion, we're going to be pulling from threads of academics, from science, from cultures around the globe to talk about a specific topic. So, today we're talking about trusting the process. When you're in the middle of growth, it doesn't feel like growth. And I was thinking about this concept that I was actually reflecting on a podcast I did a few episodes ago, or many episodes ago, about my first experience making croissants. And anytime I bake anything with yeast, I get a little nervous because I'm always scared that I have done something wrong, that I have, killed the yeast, or I put too much of something in, or too little of something, or the water wasn't just right. And to be honest, you don't really know that you've done it all right until it starts to rise. And so it feels like really stressful for me anyway to make anything with yeast because I'm always nervous that I've wasted all of this time and all of this effort and the supplies and the money, right, to bake something that isn't going to do anything. And so I was reflecting on my podcast where I was talking about the croissants that, I'd mixed the flour, the yeast, and the water, and it doesn't look like much. And you start to wonder, you mixed and you measured and you've layered and I covered it and I waited. And for a long time, when you're making anything with yeast, like when I was making croissants, it seems like nothing is happening, right? But under the surface, a quiet transformation is actually beginning. The yeast will activate and the dough expands. And what once seemed still and quiet and motionless is actually alive with this unseen energy. And I think that homeschooling is a lot like this. It feels sometimes like nothing is happening, but there is a slow rise that only reveals itself when you step back after some time. One week your kid may be struggling to multiply single digits. And then the next thing you know, they may be solving 3-digit equations and they may be feeling really confident in those 3-digit equations. And you think back like, gosh, I almost missed where we went, or there was a lot of frustration that I didn't see where we were. Because in the between process of the I don't get it and are we ever going to get there, there's a lot of frustration, there's distraction, and then there's that nagging question that's in the back of every homeschooling parent's mind. Are we doing this right? Why are we doing this? Is this the right thing for us to be doing? Should I put them back in school? Should I send them to a private school? Do I need to be joining this co-op or purchasing this curriculum? There's always the nagging questions about doing it right and doing enough. And so today, let's talk a little bit about trusting the process, because I don't think that trusting the process means that we just kind of close our eyes and hope for the best. It means that we're developing faith in the slow work in learning and in ourself and in the natural rhythm of growth that doesn't always follow a straight line. It also means that once we kind of decide that something feels right or is right for our family, it's okay to just take one step in front of the other and have the confidence that we're doing what's right because it felt right for us. I was thinking about this concept a little bit. If you've ever read a parenting book, you have probably heard of Jean Piaget, or at least his theory and stages of cognitive development. Parenting books are filled with this kind of stuff, right? There's this cognitive development that as babies learn or as kids learn, they kind of follow these stages. For example, from birth to about 2 years is a sensorimotor stage where babies are learning through senses and actions, and they master ideas like object permanence. And then from ages 2 to 7, that's the pre-operational stage, and that's really marked by symbolic thinking, like pretend play and very egocentric views. So Jean Piaget actually also came up with this concept of equilibration, which means that the mind is constantly rebalancing as it makes sense of new information. And so this concept, as kind of applied by Piaget, means that real learning isn't this constant steady climb. It's more like a staircase. that kids and adults, when we learn something new, will move forward, will plateau, will even regress before leaping ahead again. It's almost kind of like if you've ever tried to lose weight, right? You lose 2 pounds, you gain one, you lose 3 pounds, you gain two. And there, even though it may feel like this spiky, we're never making progress, over time, there's progress being made. And so I was thinking about that in terms of schooling, is that sometimes it will feel frustrating that you're asking a question and you may feel like you just covered it or that your kid just mastered it. And then they look at you with this blank stare and you think, I don't know where I've gone wrong. But kids actively are building knowledge by taking that new experience and putting it into their existing mental framework. And then when things don't fit, they're accommodating it. And that's this dynamic balance called equilibration. And that's one way that we kind of understand that growth is happening, but it's non-linear, right? They're playing, they're exploring, they're interacting, and they're making progress and they're regressing a little bit. But over time, what may feel like we're going up and down and up and down and up and down and we're not making any progress, we realize that when we come down, if we regress a little bit, it's not as far as when we first started. And over time, it's kind of like this mountain that goes up. Yes, there's peaks and valleys, then it goes up and down, but over time, it goes up. And our progress at the end is so much easier to see when we're at the end. And neuroscientists echo this same idea. There are several studies that say that when the brain is learning new things, in order for the neural pathways to solidify in our mind, it's a lot like a muscle. We need rest and repetition. So we learn something new and then our brain sleeps on it. And then we repeat the information and then our brain sleeps on it. That all of that process, the learning and the rest and the repetition, are all important. In other words, that in-between time matters just as much as that visible progress and educational time. I remember there's a lot of times that I feel like, I panic when we hit a wall. But now I'm trying to learn to take it as a sign that learning is happening underneath. I remember lecturing my kiddo about taking responsibility and caring about his own education, that I can't care more about his education than he cares about his education. I wanted him to take accountability for his education. But after some time, I just kind of thought, first of all, lectures, they're not working. So I changed my approach and I eased his routine and I trusted him to find his own pace. And I still imparted the importance of taking responsibility for his own education. And things adjusted. Now he cares about his education. Now he's propelling his education forward and he's taking pride in getting things done and learning new things and being able to take notes, and he's noting his own progress. And I think that this mindset applies far beyond academics. When we practice an instrument or we're nurturing a garden or we're building a new routine, results don't arrive on the timetable that we want. But if we persist and we have patience and purpose, eventually something will kind of shift, and not just in the outcome, but in our own ability to understand and see the progress that's being made. In 2012, researchers from the University of Pennsylvania studied what they called grit, which is the blend of passion and perseverance that predicts long-term success. And they found that people who embraced steady effort over quick results were more likely to reach meaningful goals. So it's easy to overlook that grit really flourishes when we learn to enjoy the journey itself. When we think about grit, we think about, when someone falls down, they pick themselves back up and they try something new, or they keep going, or, they dust themselves off. And that's the journey part. It's not about just grinding endlessly. It's about knowing that the confidence of picking ourselves back up to do the work that we want to do is going to shape something beautiful tomorrow. Real learning needs a lot of things. It needs trust, it needs time, it needs rhythm, and it needs patience. In thinking about that concept, the beauty of the journey, the beauty in the process, I was reminded of this. Well, I actually have a YouTube video that I saw. In Japanese culture, there's an art called, and I hope I say this right because it was just this video that I watched, but I had to Google kintsugi, which is the practice of repairing broken pottery with gold. And in this video, basically, a piece of pottery had broken. And instead of like repairing it with glue and trying to hide the cracks, the artist highlighted the cracks, basically turning the breakage, the line of the breakage, into this object's beauty. They added gold into what would be perceived as flaws. And the gold doesn't erase the flaw, it highlights it, it transforms it. And this idea, I think, mirrors the wisdom in trusting the process, that growth and repair isn't supposed to be about perfection, that we get to the end and we're perfect and it was a perfect journey the whole way, but really about transformation and knowing that every challenge will leave a mark that tells part of the story. And seeing that beautiful mark can feel or can have a lot more meaning than just feeling like shame that something was broken or that something wasn't perfect along the way. And when I think back about the years that I've been homeschooling so far, it would be easy to beat myself up over the things that didn't go right, the decisions that I made that weren't, in hindsight, the best decisions, or the frustrating days where I might have raised my voice or didn't put forth 100% of the effort. But instead, I'm hoping that by being flexible and being patient and being honest and building the trust between myself and my kids, what we actually have is a beautiful pottery that's reflecting all of the things we've learned along the way. So as you move through this week, notice the slow work that's unfolding around you. Notice the things that may feel like you're not making progress, but know that that only feels like you're not making progress because you're in the moment of it right now. Growth is happening even when it's quiet. Let's practice giving that some room. This week, may you trust the quiet transformations in your home and in your heart and know that growth is already happening. Sometimes, just like croissants, we need to just give it the space to rise.